All right, cool. Let's get her going. And we are live. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to be talking about the big old update coming up here on January the 21st from steamforge Games. We are doing a little bit of a live show today, trying something a little bit different for 2026. A little more FaceTime for me, which I'm sure people are mixed about. I know I'm mixed about it, but we're going to make it happen as we go along. Um, so big update today in that we've got the first of a series of preview articles. At least we know there is one more coming at a minimum. Steamforge was pretty forthcoming in this update, on the update here, as we are 19 days away from the big update releasing into the app on the 21st. So a couple of things for those of you that may be brand new to War Machine. In fourth edition, which is now just called War Machine, there is an annual update that occurs in January every year, where all of the armies are looked at, balances are addressed, and occasionally we get some rules changes or adjustments. This is a pretty big update this year for a couple of reasons. The first and foremost one is that the spell rack, which has been a staple of Mark IV design, is going away. And the article does a really great job explaining why the rack mechanic was in place to begin with and why they feel that the game in its current state needs to move away from having the spell rack as a thing. And again, collectively as a group, um, the reaction has been very, very positive, at least from the competitive side of things, myself included there. The rack as a mechanic, I think, was a very good mechanic when it started. The difficulty with the rack is that because these spells were always available to your casters, caster identity, which has been a thing in War Machine since time immemorial, got a little bit whitewashed out. Everybody was kind of the same color of gray because you always had your fixing spells. And because you always had your fixing spells on your rack, the casters and lists got a little bit samey at different points. Um, the rack was intentioned to be something where you could get the spells that were just common to the faction. The mechanic ended up working out was the rack defined your power as a faction, as opposed to your casters defining the power of your list and your army. And Steamforge Games has looked at that mechanic and said that is not the direction that we want the game to go. We want casters to be a meaningful choice, and we want caster design to not be inhibited by the rack. And so they are removing the rack from all of the Mark IV factions that had one, and they are rebalancing the casters within it. So what does that mean? Well, that means that the casters are being looked at and are going to receive, instead of rack slots, they're going to get some spells. In some cases, they're going to get spells that were on their rack previously. In other cases, they're going to get brand new spells that are unique to them. One of the examples that's shown in the article is Boris. Boris is going to get Snipe. So he'll be one of the first casters in Khador to ever have access to Snipe. And Calder is going to get countermeasures. And countermeasures is a really neat spell in a Calder list. Like, that is a pretty significant change. And through the article, you'll see a couple of other caster redesigns that we'll talk about a little bit. So the next bit that they talk about in pretty decent length is the lethality update. So The game as a whole has been, as we define it, pretty rocket taggy, which is not where we really want the game to be. We don't want it to be as soon as you engage that units just obliterate each other. That's not the end. One of the design issues in Mark IV um, is that there was a great emphasis on the ability to hit and hit consistently. One of the mechanics that was overutilized was gang, and they talk about it in this article here when they discuss the Brine Bloods. Uh, they were just too consistent on the Marauders hitting with gang, so they're going to adjust them to be POW 13, and they are going to be adjusting them down or adjusting them up to a POW 13 from a POW 11, but they're removing gang, so they're going to be mat 6. And when you look at the lethality update, there's going to be adjustments to mat and rats in different parts of the army. They talk specifically bots where they're going to be looking at it from different angles. I would assume that cohorts are also going to be affected, um, and we won't see some of the silly mats and that we had in the edition. Additionally, because the rack is going away, Carnage for the armies that had it is not going to be ubiquitous. It's going to be caster locked. And so the consistent lethality update, what we have to understand is it's a mat and rat adjustment. It's not too much of a POW adjustment. One of the other things that goes along with this is that sprays are generally getting a reduction. Um, Sprays of 10 to 12 are probably going to see 2 inches come off the bulk of their ranges unless there's a specific reason why they feel that particular spray should be longer. Perhaps it's on a colossal, and one of the examples is the trike is going to retain spray 12s. The railless interceptor is going to go down to spray 8s. So it's going to be different pushes and pulls. They're going to adjust model by model basis. They're going to make sure things have a role generally and look to improve the game holistically so that we have instances where the game is a little bit grindier. You could put something forward and not have an immediate destroyed at the table, which is kind of the case now. Dice are sort of irrelevant, sadly, in many cases. And we want to get it to a point where all of these things matter, which is what they're attempting to do in the game. Big important point, and they bold this in the article, is we're not making drastic lethality changes. In most places, only small tweaks were needed. Mat rat or add attack was dropped by 1. Dual attack was removed in cases where it made sense. But a lot of the time, no adjustment was made to units because it did not warrant it. That adjustment may have come elsewhere because, the general access to carnage was gone. Veteran leadership is going to be becoming more rare, and they talk about that a little bit later in the article. But there are still ways to up your mat and rat. They talk specifically about, yes, you can still hit because the Vrogger exists. Paralyzing Gaze is still going to be on the Vrogger, but you're going to need to commit the Vrogger to ensure that your unit is hitting the way that it used to. So it's about forcing additional commits. It's about making sure you have to invest to actually get the job done. In other words, we are going back to an aggressive style of play being supported and desired. So days of sitting back and peppering off the first part of the force is something that the update is looking to remove. We're looking to get back to more of grind machine a little bit, where things can actually stay on the board. Units don't obliterate other units all the time. Certainly, dice happen. Want to make sure that dice are forced to happen. It's not I rolled a 3, so you hit and now you're off the table. It's more, you got to hit that you got to hit that 6, 7, 8, and do so consistently in order to remove these units in full. And that I think is a really good thing. Additionally, they're going to be looking at quality of life adjustments as they redress everything, and they are going with a very data-driven approach to this. So they are actively looking at the stats and play rates of things with all of the data that they have available to them. But they are very quick to point out that just because they are going data driven does not mean that they are driven by data. It means they are using it as a checkpoint. And the example that they give is Exalted, because Exalted right now has a couple of dedicated fans that are keeping that win rate exceedingly high. They'll be looked at, but they're not going to be looked at as this is the most broken thing on earth. And they go on in the article to talk about the 4 people keeping it exalted. Shout out to Acres, one of the 4, who has been holding the exalted banner for a number of years here in Mark IV and making us all regret the fact that exalted are very good. Um, but I think it's just generally a skill issue where the people that are playing exalted are very skilled with exalted, and the ones that are not aren't playing exalted, and thus you see the disparity in their win rate generally. So, and then go on to give us some updates on Necrofactorium. They feel they're in a pretty good place overall, and they feel like they nailed down the horde experience for them. Um, they want to try to make sure that other casters get to shine, not just Kythos. Um, and the Sludge Thrall and the Malefactor were probably too good for their points, and they're going to be adjusted slightly. The Necro Harvester is going to come up a little bit in that he's going to go from POW 12s base to POW 15s. And his Scrap Thralls are going to be given corrosion resistance in case any of them explode nearby. Additionally, they're going to gain a new global rule, which is called inconsequential. Inconsequential means that these models, and this is generally going to be on models that are created or immobile, they are not going to be able to score objectives, and they will not contest objectives either. So essentially, they just exist on the table, but they do not interact with the scoring of objectives or the contesting of objectives at all. I think this is a great change. Um, Makes it very interesting to have these things on the table, but doesn't mean you get a scenario advantage for them when you're not paying points for these models specifically. They're just coming out as part of the creation mechanic from another model. Decadus is getting a bit of a glow up. Couple of things coming here. He is going to get a new rule called Soul Generator. This is kind of an insane rule to me because I never looked at Decadus and went, you know what he needs? Easy access to souls. So now he can make his own if the opponent doesn't bring any. So if he does not, the start of his activation, if there are no enemy models within 12 that would provide a soul to him, i.e., there's not a living model within 12 of him, Decadus gains D3 soul tokens. So again, Shard and Dusk, or in the Cricket Mirror, you get some much easier access to souls provided there's not living models near you. So your constant need to take criterions with him just to ensure that you had access to souls when you needed outside of his feet. You can stop doing that, although I think the criterions are great, so you might not stop doing that. But it's a cool little mechanic. I like that it doesn't proc if there's something that could give him a soul within 12. But I think that's a really strong mechanic. And Decadus was already a pretty strong caster. But again, Brad Park is somebody that I play fairly regularly, and Brad is a Decadus honk. So that is probably lighting my vision a little bit. Additionally, he's going to gain knowledge of the damned, so he's going to be able to use those souls to fort rerolls. So not just when using his feat. Because his feat is no longer going to provide the rerolls. It is now going to grant friendly cohort models overtake. So it gives a little more credence to taking a berserking malefactor because you can combo the berserk overtake together. And as somebody that did that with tyrants for a long time, that is a lot of fun with Sabreth. Quite a bit of enjoyment there. Lastly, in lieu of Spell Rack deck, this is going to get Ghost Walk and Death Ward as his spells, which I think are great additions for him. A lot of times he was taking Ghost Walk, and a lot of times he was taking Death Ward. So playstyle wise, he just gets a little bit easier to use, gets a little bit of quality of life improvements. And then Mechanothrall Brutes are going to go down a point from 8 points to 7 points, and for that, their mat's going to get chopped from 7 to 6. Um, so I think that's a fine change. Let's talk a little bit about Storm Legion. Storm Legion, oh my goodness, these guys are getting quite the glow up again. Um, Rafe, Huxley, and Madison Calder were definitely the meta choices last year. We want to give a reason to look at additional casters, and the glow up they give to Athena Debaro, I think if you read this, should give you tremendous hope for the care that's gone into this update. Um, they are going to replace Open Fire with Banishing Ward on Athena. She is going to get Blinding Light, which is an offensive debuff that prevents enemies from making ranged or arcane attacks. She's got a brand new spell, which is Hand of Marl. So friendly upkeeps are going to give models or units weapons blessed and the magical attack advantage. Athena is a devoted Marlin. So her feat is so enemy models within her control are going to suffer -2 death, -2 speed. As Marl's light obscures their vision, and then her models are going to gain reposition 3 to show the benefit, the benevolent glow of their leader's faith, as they put it in the article. She is also going to retain defensive formation, and just for fun, she's going to be resourceful. So essentially, she is a brand new caster with the same name. A really strong rework that I think does a ton for her viability within the metagame, which is pretty exciting. Stormguard Legionnaires have had a tough time getting through a lot of things, and thus Hand of Marl should help that quite a bit. And again, the Stormguard Legionnaires are going to be sort of redesigned into the cohort hunting portion of the faction. So they are going to trade Brutal Charge and Jack Hunter for a new rule, which is Big Game Hunter, which is basically Jack Hunter, but it works on all cohorts. So it basically goes, if you're a cohort model, we get the bonus against you with the additional damage die. Really strong. And then the Sky Raider, Sky Raider and Sky Bomber, which you never saw in good old Storm Legion. Well, they're going to get some electrical upgrades on their weapons. So they are going to interact directly with all of the electrical ionization. type attacks, which is pretty big. Um, so I am a Khador main, or I'm an Old Embry main now, and they were incredibly strong this minor season that they were in. So there's been some reworks on them, a little bit, primarily in the poster boy for Busted, which is Captain Maxim Aslanov. Aslanov is now going to be he's going to be a caster that is going to be the one caster in the faction that has Windstorm, and Windstorm is getting a major change universally. Windstorm is going from a cost 3 spell to a cost 2 spell, and the affected range will be within 3 inches of the spellcaster as opposed to 8, for the range reduction and the blast resistance. Pretty big change. It essentially means the spell turns your caster into a paragon. For those that are familiar with Battle Flame Shark. Um, so pretty big reduction in range survivability, which is now going to be key weakness for the faction. Gives everybody a point of counter for the faction, which I think is good. I think you should have weaknesses. Just going to shout out to chat real quick. Hey, Stephen. Hey, Erica. How you doing? Hope you guys are having a great night. Thanks for joining us this evening. So big change here, and I love this change. The Shearling's scapegoat ability is no longer going to be triggerable on ranged attacks. It is going to now become a melee equivalent of Shield Guard. So the Ursine Shifted and the Ursine Alpha are going to be your dedicated ranged defenders within the faction. So it's going to mean that there's an Achilles heel for Old Embry, which is going to be mid-range shooting. Crucible Guard is going to be very good into them. They've already been very good into them so far in this pre-cycle. I think they get even better. I think Winter Core is going to be a problem for them as well. Signar, if it's dedicated shooting, is also going to be a bit of an issue. It's going to be some changes in the list and how we go about it. I do really like having a melee equivalent for Shield Guard. I think the possibilities there are really cool and very exciting. A couple of bits as well. Giovanna Aga, the Dark Sister, is going to get a little bit of a change. She's going to get Live Deliciously. The Shearlings are going to lose that. That was on the Shearling Shepherd, for those that were unaware. The Shepherd and Shearling are going to go down to 4 for these changes, which is pretty big. And they're still going to have Eyeless Sight. They're still going to have guidance available to them, which is pretty big. Giovanna Aga is now going to be able to collect from 10 corpses from 10 inches away as opposed to 5, which is a pretty big change for her. Her abilities are still going to scale with the corpses, but her corpse collect isn't going to be uh, utterly utterly impossible to utilize. The biggest change, though, coming to the faction is that we get Mercs, baby. We get Colden Lord, Damian Krovnik, and Alexia, Queen of the Damned. Uh, Alexia universally is going to go up to 8 boxes from 5, which is a really big change. You can't just waste her automatically range anymore with a Lucky Blast. So I think that's a great quality of life improvement. Krovnik coming over is huge because if ever there was a faction that really wanted in a couple of casters the ability to spell slave a spell, it's Old Embry, particularly Yana and of course Maibu Reznikova. Really going to want this guy quite a bit. Also nice to have just a dispel weapon in the faction with him. Alexia, I think, has a lot of interesting play. Particularly, I think there's some really fun things you can do in Aslanov with the double revive. There's going to be times when maybe you take Nastilla and Aberration and Alexia, and again, you get a double revive. Any of the other list, there's just some interesting bits you can do with her, and her defensive stats are going to be very meaningful in the coming lethality reduction. Because again, defense I think is going to be a real stat for the first time in fourth edition, which is going to be a change. It's honestly a change that I'm looking forward to quite a bit. Uh, Strix is going to get shifter on his chain attack. He gets a new chain attack shifter. It's the same thing that Bodan has on his bird gun, which means if Strix hits with both of his claws, he gets to shifter onto the model that he hit, which means he gets to go into base-to-base contact with it. So he can get a little bit extra threat range out of it. He can get to different models. He can move about if the two claws hit. Quite fun on something like a colossal, where maybe he just comes in, takes a couple hits on the colossal, goes back, and then starts munching on things that he actually wants to hit to then trigger his lightning strike to get out of there, which is pretty big. Other faction I love and play a bunch of, and played a bunch last year until the release of getting a couple things directly changed. Um, we have the Saren and Rise update. Shadow Flame Shard is getting a couple of changes. Shyrus was Rack 3. Uh, she had access to Silence of Death and Dragon's Blood, and both of those went incredibly well with the Chimera or the Tri-Chimerics, along with the ability to stop charging. On her feet, Shyrus being a 3-rack caster, they've done a couple things for her. They have given her Host of Shadows. They have given her Mirage, which is a spell I am insanely excited for with Shyrus. I think that is probably a mistake, but I am going to let them make it, because now we can Mirage and then Hunter's Mark a beast forward or Mirage a unit. There's a lot of fun that can be had with Mirage in the Shadow Flame Shard. And she's going to get Distraction, which is also a really great spell. For this, she is going to have a little bit of change up on her feat. The feat is no longer going to prevent enemy charges. Instead, it's going to inflict a -3 penalty to enemy models that charge. So that change is pretty interesting. You're still going to be able to defeat it with trampling. You're going to get to do your full distance regardless. If you do charge, and you can, you're going to be at -3 speed. So effectively, you're just going to be at your speed to charge. So it's like you walked up, but you are going to get the benefit of the charge provided that you went at least 3 inches. So it's kind of a side grade feat. It's strictly worse, but probably not that worse, but it will ensure the Trichimerics is a little more um, vulnerable. The other things that are going to ensure that the Trichimerics is vulnerable is he is going to be 14 inches. All of his range 14 weapons have been reduced to 12. And the negation tail, which was the reason you were bringing him, is going to be 2 points more. He's still going to be a rapid healing. He's still going to be a gargantuan. So he just is going to be a little less standoffish, is all it is. I think with the changes, his home probably shifts to Kyrax. I was already running him with Kyrax, so I don't think that there's too much wrong here. He's going to be a little more expensive, and he's going to be a little less rangy, but he gets to retain the negation tail. Doesn't go away; it just gets more expensive, and he still gets rapid healing. So I think the trike is still going to be viable in a couple spots. Speaking of viable, let's talk about 2 casters we never saw. We've got Lilith and Valix. Valix was probably the coolest looking caster that nobody ever played because he was Saddest Panda. Saddest Panda no more, likely. He is going to embrace the fact that he's based on a Talon Lasher, and as such, he's going to go up from melee range 1 to melee range 3. He's going to have drag on those weapons. They are going to be chain weapons. He is going to be a weapon master, and he's going to have critical knockdown. We also know that he is getting Massacre uh, at a battle group level, which is pretty neat. And that was from the live stream that they did. So yeah, Valix is pretty exciting on the whole. And then speaking of exciting, let's talk about my girl Lilith, who I tried to make her work. I tried to enjoy playing her, and I just didn't have to continue with her, and instead was just on the Shyrus and Kyrex plan last year. Uh, Lilith is going to get Silence of Death, which is pretty big because that was our dominant spell on the rack. It was pretty much the de facto one. The fact that she's getting it automatically bumps her up into um, quite a big spot. She is also going to get Morgul's spell Night Reflection, which is a cost 3 offensive spell that blinds enemies that are 8 inches away. Uh, so she is going to be able to blind people at distance, which is pretty fantastic. Gives a reason to maybe take an Arc Node head on a Vipex, which is never fun to even say, but it is an option with her with this. Hush, the Hush Bow is now going from a reload 2 to a straight 3. I will not have to additional shots with Lilith anymore. It won't default her to doing the big draw. It's now going to be a rate of fire 3 gun, and I am super excited for this. Lilith is better. Lilith is when she gets to make more shots. That is just how it has worked with Lilith forever. Super excited for that. Speaking of models we never saw, Regulus. Regulus is still going to be cost 4. He is still going to have espionage, but he's going to get a couple of life improvements. He's going to pick up a point of armor and go to arm 13 instead of arm 12. He's going to be reposition 5. And he is going to gain dodge. So he's going to be def 15, annoyance with dodge, and he is going to be more viable because solos in general are going to be more viable, and we'll get to that in just a bit. The last improvement is the Wormspine Cinderbacks are going to go down a point from 9 to 8, and they're going to pick up Prowl. And because when you shoot, they make clouds that they put on themselves, they are now going to gain stealth because they're prowled inside of concealment. Which is pretty fantastic. That's a great quality of life improvement. I love them at cost 8. At cost 9, they were really hard to find the lists and feel good about it. At cost 8, much more interesting. Crucible Guard are getting a little bit of a spanking. When they came out, they were a little bit aggressive. Couple of things are changing. The big one is Chemical Warfare is moving to removing the line that says it cannot be rolled for. Instead, you are going to be able to roll to extinguish your fire and extinguish your corrosion every turn, and not just be subject to the double damage automatically, and not have to have put the fires out as your only counter, which is pretty big. Yeah, I really like that change. The other change I like, remember how we talked about the range reduction? coming. Again, multiple spots. Sprays are going to go down from 10 or 12 range, come down by 2. One of the models affected is going to be the Railless Interceptor. The Railless is going to go from range 10 to range 8 on its sprays, which is pretty big. The other big change here is instead of having a shield, it is going to have a buckler. So it's going to have a +1 armor instead of +2 armor, which is a pretty significant change. Faction that has fairly ubiquitous access to decel. A couple of other things. We talked a little bit about veteran leader going away. One of the instances here is Prospero. Prospero is losing veteran leader. There's going to be a lot of spots where veteran leader is cut across armies. Again, as part of the lethality reduction, he is also going to lose a point for that. So Prospero is now going to cost 3 points instead of 4, which is pretty excellent. Infernals, everybody's favorite. And by everybody's favorite, I mean Cody's favorite and nobody else's, are going to get some tweaks and some changes, which are pretty significant. First and foremost, we are going to have our first instance since the dawn of Mark IV of some models being retired to Legacy from Prime. Eilish 1, or Eilish Garrity the Occultist, Orin Midwinter Run, which is the Rogue Inquisitor, Saxon Auric and Crow's Cutthroats are all going to be moved to Legacy. Again, big reminder that this army is also going to get reworked towards the middle of this year, with it coming to the STLs and being a printable army. So it is very likely that some of these abilities, if they are found to be needed, will be coming on new solos or new instances of these models that are not 20 years old and impossible to find. Getting a 4th master, which is Vorgruth, and the Vorgruth is going to be a summoning focused master. Spent a lot of time in the article talking about how summoning is not changing as a core rule. It will function exactly the same as it does today. Zadaroth is getting a bit of a side grade. She is going from, her feat is going from a Def 3 bonus to a Def 2 bonus. Windstorm was reduced, and so Dark Legacy is also going to be reduced. Dark Legacy was a range 10, now it is going to be a range 5. She is also losing Scything Touch and gaining Carnivore. Carnivore is moving to a global spell, or globally is going to be against +2 to attack rolls against enemies of all types, not just living. So Carnivore gets a huge improvement. She gets it. She's going to get more accurately, saving some space in the faction for Omidamos to really be the one that lets you hit hard. Speaking of a little bit of a glow up, Agathon gets a little bit of a change in that he's going to get a Field Marshal's Sacred Ward for all of his horrors and models in his battle group. He is going, and the Gate of War and the Infernal Gate, which has the Gate of Worlds ability, which for those keen-eyed folks will understand that it is also on Auriax from the Sea Raiders, is going to no longer be capped at once per turn. Pardon me. So you're going to be able to move the model still only once, but you're going to be able to move more than one model, provided you have the souls. Then there's a big update on Thornfall Alliance, which is getting its STLs starting this month. They're going to be part of the new welcome package. They are also shifting a couple of things out of the army. The Talon, the Rover, and the Nomad, the Mule, Alton Ashley, Gobber Tinker, Gundren, Rollick, Victor, Linus, and Edra are no longer going to be playable in Prime Thornfall. They are still going to be in other armies of Legend in Prime, but they will not be available in Thornfall. Thornfall gets a brand new character beast, Lystersis, which I think is the disease you get if you eat raw pork. He is a porknoid, so pigs get an arachnoid. Everyone rejoices. It's fantastic. They're getting a new Valkyrie solo who is going to bring desperate pace and stir the blood to the army for Pharaoh. There's going to be a Pharaoh Cav unit. They're going to have crit knockdown, trash, and improvised harpoons, which is pretty cool. My favorite thing in the new army, Lord Carver, Esquire the Third, is going to be stepping up to full role of a warlock in the faction, as opposed to just being a merc. That comes with MMD 47. MMD 47 is getting a promotion to being a character beast for the faction, and it's going to be 17 points. So some great quality of life improvements here for them. Dr. Arcadius is going to get Field Marshal Channeler, so even more Porknoids. He is also going to pick up Pursuit. So Arcadius is going to be doing bad touch things to people yet again. The Roadhog is going to go from arm 18 to arm 19, and the cleaver on it is going to go from melee range 1 to melee range 2. So they finally get a reach 2 heavy in pigs. Not going to be able to do 30 feral hogs, but you can run 8 razor boars. They're going to trade out brutal charge and a yield for a brutal charge and a yielding for flank razor boar and extended control range. Those are going to be available in this month's welcome package, which is pretty excellent. There are a couple of changes coming to Armies of Legend as well. And again, for those that don't remember, Armies of Legend are the old school legacy armies that are legal in Prime, and the models that are legal in Prime for them set up into armies. Those are going to get looked at in 2026 update as well. A couple of things are already again, they're going to be looking to remove veteran leader pretty often, just as they did with Prospero, and you'll probably see some points reduction there. The Dire Troll Mauler and the Scorn Titan Gladiator are both going to go down to 12 points. The Mauler is going to go down to 12. The Titan Gladiator is going to go down to 13 points. Amenad Raza, we have a Menoff sighting, is getting a little bit of a rework. He is getting resourceful, and his feat is going to go from just giving out 1 bonus focus to each of his warjacks to granting them a full 3 focus. So pretty big improvement there for him. I don't think it saves him because Guardians is just kind of meh. We've got Gordon Grunback. Gordon is going to trade out Eruption for Boundless Charge. That's a pretty great trade there. And he's going to be able to cast the Boundless Charge on himself as well. Typhon, which is probably the greatest blow up in the history of Earth. And just go straight back 3. For that, he's going to go up from 17 points to 18 points. 6 initials, though. Thank you, thank you, thank you. As an old school Legion guy, this is a huge improvement, huge change. You'll see Typhon on the table again. Excited to play with them. Just based on that, that is a really exciting bet. Speaking of exciting bets, we get a little bit of a preview into the Steamroller 2026. There's going to be more coming in part 2, but they did leave us with a couple of things. Initially, there was a cap on Steamroller 2026 on objectives, meaning they were only ever going to use 1 of each type, up to 1 of each type in a scenario. They are removing that restriction from themselves. So in 2026, we are going to see a scenario that has the need for 4 flags, i.e., each player brings 2, and another scenario that requires 4 40 mils, i.e., each player brings 2. So definitely a time to talk to your friends that have 3D printers and are subscribed to War Machine 3D. Because if you have a 3D printer, you should be subscribed to War Machine 3D. It's the best $10 you can spend every single month. Again, not sponsored, but hashtag would love to be. Um, Definitely worth printing some more up, just making sure you have extra 40s, extra 30s because of these 2 scenarios. It does mean that it's a little bit more of a burden on players and new players. But again, as a community and the ubiquitousness of 3D printers and folks that have War Machine 3D, and I'm sure that the objective packs are going to be upgraded to include more of these things. They just won't be as they are currently. But yeah, get them printed, get extra bases, play them. And tournament organizers, something to keep in mind if you, as you're getting ready for the season, to get some more of these built out, printed out. Talk to your folks in your community that have 3D printers if you don't, to get some built so that folks have them for all of the wonderful steamrollers are going to be played. The biggest change announced, though, and I alluded to this earlier, is that solos are now going to be back to a bit of viability, provided they're not inconsequential. But a non-inconsequential solo and casters or leaders are now going to be able to score objective terrain without needing a second model to help. So they're going to basically count as fat. So they're going to count as 2 models as opposed to 1 and allow you to score an objective terrain all on their own. Love this change. I love having a dedicated role for solos. It's been something that was missing in 2025, and I thought the game was a little bit worse for it. Um, you were actively finding ways to remove as many solos as you could. And I think giving a role to solos where they're going to be able to score these objective terrains, making objective terrains more a part of the game, i.e., you're giving us more objective terrain to be able to try and score. I think these are good combinations to be attempting and looking at as we move forward in 2026. I am super excited for this update. I do think, as I say in the clickbaity title, War Machine will never be the same. I do feel that this is sort of that magical point in every edition where we kind of click over into the point 5. These are huge changes. Don't be mistaken. We are going to be going from a purely rocket tag game to an attempt to reduce the lethality, i.e., make people miss again, make terrain matter, make defense matter, make positioning matter again, allow for more skill expression in the game. I think that is a great thing, and we're going to bring back, hopefully, aggression to the game. War Machine has always been a game that has prided itself on being about being aggressive and taking it to your opponent. Uh, as much as page 5 was an unfortunate chapter in how it was worded in most of the instances, the true spirit of it was play aggressively. This is not a game where you sit back and gunline off your opponent. This is about getting into your opponent's face, forcing trades, playing a very positional strategic game, being aggressive. If this lethality update is done correctly, I think we will be back in a spot where we get to play aggressively again. We're rewarded for baiting out the opponent. We're rewarded for playing aggressively as opposed to playing overly defensively. That's things that I'm looking forward to in 2026. I look forward to seeing Steamroller. I think the Steamroller puts a lot of things into context for the year because it always does. Because the balance change is part of it, but Steamroller is really the lens through which we see the game. At least I see the game. It is where I I draw most of my inspiration for the game. Most of my list building is centered around how it interacts with the scenario packet, and the scenario packet really drives which armies are viable, which builds are viable, as opposed to not, even more so than the caster selections in many cases. Because you can always play scenario. You don't always get to choose who you're playing against. So you got to get really good at playing scenario. The other bit that I think is to bring up here, which is not in this, but is kind of the crux of the entire changes that we have gone through in this edition. We are going to be moving out the spell rack. You always had access to your little pet spells, your little tricks. Um, if your opponent was bringing guns and you had Windstorm available, you were taking Windstorm. If your opponent had something that could push pull you, you were taking Inviolable Resolve if you had access to Inviolable Resolve. If you had, um, if you were facing armor, you took your damage spell. Uh, that is going away because each caster is going to have their own separate, unique spell lists. They are going to have their own tools. So it's going to be about putting together the toolkit that you want and need across your list pair. And that is very interesting. Um, it also means that we're going to be in a situation where we are not just going to have, in case of emergency, pick the right rack spells, and play basically the same game you play all the time. We're going to have a lot more instances of quote unquote bad matchups, which can still happen today if you rack wrong. But now you may just not have an answer in your list pair because you need the answers to this other thing, and you have got to engineer yourself a dodge, and sometimes you don't hit your dodge. And so for older school players, you have all gone through this through editions where you don't have the answers in your list per se. You have to find the tools that are there, your little individual answers that are baked into the synergies within your cards that are in your wheelhouse and uh, your area and your vector. And you're going to have to get comfortable being uncomfortable and finding ways to get to a win. So maybe it means doubling down on scenario. Maybe it means that your out in this game is only ever going to be assassination. And so you are going to change your mindset to be assassination focused in this game. Maybe it means you have to play very, very cagey. In other games, it may mean you have to play exceedingly aggressively because it's the only way to change the momentum of the game, um, just based on how you match up. So it is about finding the little space, it's finding the gaps in those matchups that are not automatically favorable, are not automatically fixed by a spell to, maybe it means that for this matchup, you have to think about having this tech piece in your list specifically for these situations. And that's something we haven't had to think about this edition because our tech piece was the rack. Um, so there's a lot of little nuance in this, and I think it's a very exciting time, and I think it's going to be a very exciting time in War Machine for the next couple of months. As soon as the update drops on the 21st, make sure you get your app ready, get it ready for download, all those good things. Really a great time to be experimenting. You should be trying as many things out as you can. And I think the time of experimentation in this edition is going to be a lot longer cycle, particularly if they get things right. Because I think you have an opportunity with this update. And I think the um, the Athena disclosure and the Shyrus disclosure really give me a lot of confidence that there's been a lot of care into the crafting of these casters, into making them an interesting experience. into making them unique and having very interesting tools that they can bring to a pairing. And I think you're going to need to be thinking about pairings more than you have this edition previously, because again, the rack bailed us out of a lot of things. I think now it's going to be about how do casters meld together? How do they work into the meta? And how do they work into the scenario packet, which we know, at least from the preview, is going to be significantly different than the current one. We're going to have instances where we have more opportunities to score objective terrain. There's going to be 4 patches of objective terrain as opposed to 2. There's going to be instances where there are more troop objectives than ever before. We're going to have 4 on the table as opposed to just 2. That already tells us that infantry is going to be a focus, because we have two scenarios at least previewed, in that, hey, there's going to be one that has 4 40mm objectives and one that has 4 flags. What does that mean? Well, you need bodies. You need bodies or you need solos on the objective terrain one. And on the 40mm one, you need bodies. You need infantry units. And they're going to be able to act probably independently, because I would assume those are probably going to be in desperate places across the board. Because if you got 4 of them, that's a lot of spots that they could be on the board. Uh, I think mobility is going to be very much a key stat this steamroller. I think there's going to be a big push towards infantry, which is interesting. I also think cohorts are going to be far more important than they've been, and they've already been very important. But again, they're going to be your most reliable source of range damage because of the boosting. They're going to be your most reliable source of melee damage as well, because again, they're going to be where you can boost. Be where you can hit to boost. And again, when we talk lethality, the lethality is mostly going to come from the reduction of the lethality is mostly coming from stopping general buffs to hit that are not requiring a actual direct investment. Getting rid of veteran leader, getting rid of ubiquitous gang in spots where it makes sense, getting rid of dual attacks where it makes sense. Uh, and a general reduction of mat and rat by one in some cases where it's warranted. So again, there's still going to be some things that are going to be able to hit well. There'll be other things that don't hit as well. And they're going to be looking to find roles for things, but I think they've done a lot of care in how they are crafting these casters. I think they are trying to make each caster exciting and viable, and I think if they pull that off, it is going to be a hell of an addition. It's still the same edition, but it feels like a 0.5. Feels like a marked new era in the game. It feels very exciting to having these racks removed, getting back to an era of matchups being not pre-decided by rack interaction, but being about what you've brought and how you utilize that list. We hopefully get to a spot where we're not as rocket taggy, i.e. things actually stick on the board a little bit better, and we can bait things out, have more of a little bit of a grind, not everything flying off the table as soon as it's put down and put in range of the opponent. I think it is very exciting to see what they are going to do with the rest of it. I look forward to the part 2 article. But this has me exceedingly excited. I'm always excited for the January update, always excited for new Steamroller. This one has me really, really excited because, again, we are building the game into something even better than it's been before. Um, Getting back to a little bit more of the back and forth, and the back and forth, I think, is what a lot of us really love. I think bringing back aggressive styles of play is going to be exceedingly helpful. I think having a steamroller packet that is aiming to look at mobility quite a bit more is a good thing. We've already been forced to be pretty mobile. I think this one is going to be even more mobile. required. And I think it's going to force you to make some real interesting choices in list design just based on what we're seeing in that little bit of a tidbit preview. I love the fact that solos are going to have a role again in that they're going to be able to solo score, i.e. solo. Um, they're going to be able to score on their own objective terrain. Leaders will as well. So your caster, your warlock, your infernal master, going to be able to just go into a piece of scenario terrain, and you don't need to have any friends with them in order to score it. That is a big, big change, and I think it just makes it better for the game as a whole. Uh, very excited to have walked through the preview. I thank everybody that joined us this evening for that. Please like and subscribe. Please leave a comment if this was something that you enjoy and you want to see more of. You want to see more of these live shows as opposed to me just talking, actually getting on here and dealing with it. Do want to respond to Stephen in the chat, which was a while ago. I think the power of Athena and Cyrus's feat will depend on if it is in current range or within control range. I would agree with that, Stephen. My understanding is if it does not call out a change, there was no change to it. So this would still retain um, this would still retain that the model being charged is currently in the control range for Iris's feet. I know Jay clarified that in a statement on one of the discords. I can't remember which one. I think it was Himbo or Trash Cord, as the vernacular calls it. But yeah, check us out. We are also doing a whole bunch of fun stuff on the TikTok now. I have jumped over to where the kids are, which is pretty cool. And yeah, I appreciate everybody jumping on. We'll try and do some more of these. I was going to paint and I didn't. So maybe next time we try some painting with this and we just talk and chat. But yeah, thanks again. And remember, always listen to Tyrants on the Field, even when he's spouting nonsense. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.